All right, name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God, amen. So just like I asked, today was the feast of the Epiphany. And what's another name for Epiphany? Theophany. And the Theophany, what does that word mean? Theo means God, good. Phany means, not your butt. Manifestation. Right, so it's the manifestation of God. It's when God appeared, right, as a Trinity. And today it's focused on this baptism of Christ, right? So St. John the Baptist, you all know the story. He went and he baptized Christ, and when he walked up, Christ he said to Christ, I should be baptized by you, but that wasn't the case. And Christ said, let it be. But I don't want to talk about the Epiphany today because there's some people who don't like talking about the Epiphany. I want to talk about St. John the Baptist. So what did Christ say about St. John the Baptist? He gave him a title that's Daniel Colta. Holy freaking moly, son. He gave St. John the Baptist a title that's remarkable. And because of that title, St. John the Baptist has a place in the church that no one else has. What did he call him? No, he's a forerunner. That's his title. But what did Jesus say about him? Yes, there is none born from women there's none greater that are born of women. There is no human born that's greater than him. And this is really an amazing title. And honestly, I'm preparing the sermon for Sunday, and I didn't really get why we say that about St. John the Baptist. Right? I mean, you can Google, and hopefully one of you guys do by the end of this talk, how many words St. John the Baptist actually said. Not many. Talking 80. So let me get this straight. God is going to come into the world. He's going to send one guy who's going to be the forerunner. He's going to prepare the way, make straight the paths. And this guy that you're going to send is going to say 80 words. And he's going to be it. He's the guy who prepares everything. And you have to think to yourself, you could have done better than that. Could have sent a guy who's eloquent, maybe a St. John Chrysostom. Sorry, I can't breathe. So on Sunday, we're going to read this gospel. And after this, Jesus and his disciples went into the Judean countryside where he spent some time with them and baptized. Now, John also was baptizing near Salem because there was plenty of water and people were coming and being baptized. An argument developed between some of John's disciples and a certain Jew over a matter of ceremonial washing. They came to John and said to him, Rabbi, the man who is with you on the other side of the Jordan, the one you testified about, look, he is baptizing and everyone is going to him. I want you to think about that. So the church likes to stay in a season for a while. Today's the Epiphany. The church doesn't move on very easily, as you noticed. So even on Sunday, we're going to talk about St. John the Baptist. We're going to talk about baptizing. But it's going to be a different aspect. This title, the greatest among born of women. And by the way, St. John the Baptist is the only person in the church whose birthday we celebrate. Other than Jesus, Christmas, and St. Mary. It's only 3 birthdays we celebrate in the entire church. And St. John the Baptist is one of them. And in fact, those of you guys who are deacons, you know that those of you who are deacons, we say through the prayers of this saint and that saint and this saint and that saint. It's cutting out, isn't it? I don't know why. But with St. John the Baptist, we say something else. What do we say? Through the intercession. And he's the only guy who gets that. Him and St. Mary and the cherubim and the seraphim. Everyone else, we say through the prayers of St. Athanasius, through the prayers of St. George, through the prayers of Saint whoever. But with St. John the Baptist, we say intercede on our behalf, not just pray on our behalf. He's got a title. He's greater than everybody else, greater than all the martyrs. He's below the cherubim, but that's it. No other human being other than St. Mary is above him. So it's quite a remarkable thing. And then you count 80 words and you think, what's all the hubbub? And then it's interesting, too, that Christ sends someone to prepare the way for him. And the guy he sends is what? He's not a talker. He's a doer. Interesting. He didn't send an eloquent guy who said a lot of words and filled like the prophets and the, reams of chapters on stuff. He was just a doer. He just was. And that's who Christ chose to prepare the way for him, to be the forerunner. And so we often think about John's fiery spirit, right? That's the thing that comes to mind. You think John the Baptist, you think he cusses people out. He calls the Pharisees, you brood of vipers. He calls people out. He goes to King Herod. He says, you can't marry your brother's wife. He gets his head cut off. He says, I don't care. I'm still going to say it. And the cynics are, after they cut his head off, they hold it up. And as they cut his head off, after they cut his head off, he says, you still can't marry your brother's wife. Right? This is St. John the Baptist that we know. I don't know what's going on. Maybe there's some electronic thing. Right? So this is the St. John the Baptist we know. And he was very strong, and he was very decisive and powerful, and he spoke the truth. And even Jesus said about him, what did you expect to see? Who can finish it for me? A reed blowing in the wind. Get the image? Right? They're like, what did you expect to see? What is a reed blowing in the wind? What's a reed? It's like a big, tall blade of grass, right? And they blow in the wind. That's how they don't break. Okay, like a palm tree. And he said to them, did you expect to find a reed blowing in the wind? Like, did you expect to find someone weak? Someone who just gives in? So they got John the Baptist, right? This super strong guy. And so I want to be strong, and I want to be decisive like that, and I want to be firm like that, and I want to be strong in my faith. So how do I get there? And today's gospel gives the answer to that. And honestly, I hadn't seen it until I started reading today's gospel very carefully. It started innocently enough. They came to John and said, Rabbi, the man who was with you on the other side of the Jordan, everyone is going to him. Ouch. Is John a man? Question. Is he a man? Is he like me? Sure. Does he get jealous? Does he have an ego? Yeah. I mean, you've got one job. You baptize people, right? They call you John the Baptist. And now someone comes along, the guy over there, everyone's going to him. And as a human, as a man, it's got to affect you, right? I mean, if people come up to me and say, Marchie, your sermons are okay, but Abuna Krylos' are amazing. Everyone loves Abuna Krylos' sermons. In fact, they like them a lot more than yours. I'd be like, ouch. Or they said, you're nice and all, but everyone loves Abuna Andrew. He's so much fun. The kids love him. And they prefer him to you. I'd be like, ouch. All right, in fact, we were just at a retreat powwow where we were discussing what went wrong, what went right in the Coptic retreat. And if they had said, everyone liked all the speakers, except yours wasn't that great, I would have went, ouch. What was going to hurt? What hurts? What stings when you tell me that?
The fact that you put a lot of work in.
Yeah, but so what? What's stinging? My ego, right? My pride, right? And if you're teaching a Sunday school class with someone else and everyone says, everyone really likes the other servant more than you. I mean, this doesn't have to go far. I mean, you can have a bazaar at your church and everyone says, everyone likes her macaroni bechamel more than your macaroni bechamel, right? I mean, you all know, your mom knows her macaroni bechamel is the best, right? And if anyone dares say, Tanta such and such is makarona bechamel. You know, your mom would be like, what? Excuse me? And so John to this replied something that's wonderful. And this is why he's the man. This is why Christ said, no one is greater than him. What does he reply? He could say, well, yeah, but I mean, I baptize too, and I'm pretty cool, and, I have a lot of disciples too, and he's God, that's why. But he didn't. What did he say? A person can only receive what is given to him from heaven. It's such a good answer. He's basically saying, I don't have what he has. I only have what I have. And what I have, I was given. And what I was given was a gift. And I don't have that gift. And that gift is from heaven. That's quite a realization. For all of those of you who serve in any capacity or help people out or have friends or anything, you know how much it hurts when someone compares you to someone else and says, yeah, they're really cool. I love this person. They're so funny. They're the best. And you're like, aren't I funny too? And yet John the Baptist replies, everything comes from God. Everything comes from heaven. Everything we are given comes from above. That's the first words out of his mouth. He has perspective. He knows what he is and what he is not. And he is not jealous of what he is not. Unfortunately, this riddles the church. I see someone serving and someone's got a good voice. I mean, I have an amazing voice, right? I mean, when I sing, people think it's angels in the church. Right? But there are people, hard to believe, that have voices better than mine. I know. And people get jealous. Or someone serves in some way that I don't. Or someone has this talent that I don't have. Can people wish that someone else not serve because they want to serve? Can I see someone else be successful in their service and think to myself, I want to be that guy? Can I see someone who's, more knowledgeable about dogma and ecumenical councils and tradition, and someone asks a question, and instead of coming to me, they go to the guy next to me? Every once in a while that happens to me, where someone will go, oh, hey, I had a question. And I'll go, yes, I'm wearing black. And then they'll go to the guy next to me who actually knows the answer, and they'll say, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I'm right here. You could have asked me. What is that? It's my ego. So my response in those situations isn't everything is given from heaven. My response is, hey, what about me? And so then he continues. I mean, his response is spectacular. I have too many things in my hands. But then he says more. He says, the bride belongs to the bridegroom. What does that even mean? Who's the bridegroom? Christ. Who's the bride? The church, us, the people. So Christ has the bride, and she belongs to him. Can I be jealous? Can I attend my friend's wedding and wish the bride was marrying me? Not if I'm a friend. Right? Not a real friend would never do that. And so he responds, the bride belongs to the bridegroom. Look at the clarity with which he's speaking. He's like looking at everybody like, what's wrong with you, bro? The bride belongs to the bridegroom. And he continues, the friend of the bridegroom who stands by and listens for him rejoices greatly when he hears the bridegroom's voice. So if I'm the friend of the bridegroom, and I hear his voice, I'm not jealous. I'm like, hey, how come she's with him and not with me? What kind of friend is that? When I hear his voice, I rejoice because he's my friend. And I want the bride to be with him, and I want them to be together. And I'm never jealous of that power. So when the people tempted John and they said, others are leaving you, what was his answer? They aren't mine. They're his. What an answer. Half the problems in the church are because we don't give that answer, by the way. Half the problems we see among the clergy and the bishops and the popes and the servants and the everybody is because when people are saying, hey, people are leaving, the response isn't, they aren't mine. They're his. They're God's. He's the bridegroom. And so do people attack others for their gifts? Yeah. I mean, even look at the sinful woman when she poured the ointment on Jesus. What did Judas say? Who remembers? Couldn't this have been sold for 300 denarii and given to the poor? Well, it's because he's a thief and he had the box, whatever. Who is he looking at when he said it? Her. So this woman goes, takes this very precious ointment, spends a lot of money doing it, is pouring it on Christ. She's giving what she has. And this jerk looks at her in the eye and says, you could have sold that and given it to the poor. Do people do that? Do people watch other people do really great things and then attack them? Yeah, I do it all the time. We all do. Why? Because we don't know that the bride belongs to the bridegroom. We kind of want the bride, forgive me, for ourselves. We want the people for ourselves. We want the people to follow us, to like us, to respect us, to admire us, to think we are very knowledgeable, we're very spiritual, we're very intellectual, we're very friendly, we're very organized. We're not interested in connecting them to the bridegroom. We're interested in connecting them to us. And so John the Baptist deflected this temptation. And when he did that, he revealed who and what he was. And he's a pretty amazing guy. And he did it with style and perspective and clarity. And that's something you got to respect about John the Baptist. Clarity. He just saw it. And he called it. Right? People walk in and he says, the Pharisees come up to him and he says, you brood of vipers. This is what you are. And then he ends this with the verse that ends all verses. He ends this, and again, not a man of many words. I didn't say a lot of words here, did I? He said a very few words, and he hit it all right on the head. And then he ends it with the verse of all verses. What is it? The one we should all know. The one that if you live by is everything in your spiritual life, in your married life, in your social life, in your school life. Huh? He must increase and I must decrease. How many words is that? 5? 7? And it's stunning. How many words is it? 6. Must increase. I must decrease. Unless you put and. 7.
8.
Whatever. Different translations. Deal. Okay. He must increase and I must decrease. In that one verse, halas, it's over. In that one verse, they're still debating. They're so cute. In that one verse contains the entire secret of Christianity. And if we get this line and we live by it, there's nothing left. You don't need to learn any more verses on how to be a Christian, how to pray, how to serve, how to fast, how to live, how to love. It's all in there. He must increase and I must decrease. And it's not just a state, it's a trajectory. There is no goal. There is no end. He must increase continuously, and I will decrease continuously until there's nothing left. Nothing left in me. So in this very famous book, Father Matthew the Poor, Abunametta, stud, This book called Grain of Wheat. How many people have read it? If you haven't read it, honestly, I didn't know about this book until I was 46. That's ridiculous. And the person who told me about it looked at me like I had 3 heads. He's like, you haven't read this book? And I'm like, what? I read a lot of books, whatever. And then I read this book. I'll tell you what, I remember where I was when I read this book. I remember where I was sitting when I read this book. I was on vacation in Sharm el-Sheikh and I was on a lounge chair, and I can tell you where that chair is when I read this book. That's the impact this book had on me. And what he says, he focuses on the I must decrease part, the grain of wheat. So think about the grain of wheat. Remember this verse in the grain of wheat? Unless a grain of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it can bring forth no more fruit. It has to fall and it has to die. And so the Lord wants us to destroy the old self. The old self is the man of lust and pride and dignity, false freedom. His ego is his only concern, how he looks, how he's perceived. And I'm saying he, but it's also she. His thoughts, his labors, his hate, his grief, his joy, his peace, his fear, his glory, and even his worship are all about himself. Do people worship God in order to bring praise to themselves? Sure. All the time. Do people serve God to bring praise to themselves? Sure, all the time. And so he talks about how we need to destroy this self, this old man, the old Adam, and how God does that in us. And so what we have to focus on is letting God do it. God does it. You can't do it. You just have to let him. And you let him by getting out of the way. You just have to get out of the way and not fight back. Because many things in your life are trying to destroy the old self, and you don't even know it. I'll read you a quote from him. He says, "This is a very hard process. So God uses all possible measures, direct or indirect, to attack the self. He applies constant pressure, a pressure which never ceases. God could choose different means, but is content to act in this way, for he has one goal: to destroy man's pride and its power, and to break the bonds that imprison the spirit of the new man." So the old man is the prison that the new man lives in. The self is under siege within the body, seeking to avoid God's blows against it. It may appear at first to sicken, but then it recovers. So God constantly changes his means of attack. This is like so awesome. You guys hearing this? The self is under siege. You know when something's under siege, like a city's under siege, right? It's bracing for blows. It's got the gates up. It's being attacked on all sides. So the self is under siege within the body, seeking to avoid God's blows. This is what we do. We huddle up and we avoid God's attempts at killing the old self. How do we do that? How do we avoid God's purposeful siege on the old self? The main way we do it, we pray about it, oddly enough. As soon as God gives us something difficult in our life, what's the first thing we do? God, please take this thing away from me. So we actually ask God to remove the thing that he's doing to us, for us, because he loves us. And the first words out of our mouth is, yeah, we're not interested. Thank you. God, please take this away. My boss is a jerk. Can you please make him not a jerk? My parents don't understand. Can you please make them understand? My boss is whatever. My wife, my girlfriend, my whatever is whatever. Can you just make her not that way and make him not that way? Make him not to be such a jerk. Because I don't like it. It's bothering me. He continues. It may first appear to sicken, but then it recovers. So God constantly changes his means of attack. At home, for example, he may use parents. Sound familiar? Brothers and sisters. Sound familiar? At school or in the street, he may use one's friends. If these means fail, he uses a person's employer or rivals, or else his job and his reputation. If such methods also fail, he uses the power of natural creation. Animals and insects, by inflicting weakness or illness. When I read this, insects, he uses insects. What do you think he's talking about? He's a monk. Mosquitoes. It's the first thing that came to mind. Anyone been to a monastery? It sucks. There's mosquitoes everywhere. And then I thought about it. Holy moly. He's under torment. Like, I go for 2 days and I'm over it. I can't wait to get home where there's no mosquitoes. And these guys, relentless. At night, they can't sleep. It's hot. The mosquitoes are buzzing. They go by your ear. And he's looking at these mosquitoes. He's like, wow, God's using the mosquitoes. He's changing his attack on me. Now he's turned to the mosquitoes and the insects and the illness and the weakness and the parents and the boss. Finally, if all things fail, man is delivered into the hands of Satan, who will humiliate him and apply such discipline as God in his love has not used. The devil is merciless in his activity, and thus man is at last humbled and brought down to the dust. And so this is the attack on the self that God is perpetrating. And what we do is we cower from it. We brace for the blows. We try to avoid them. We pray about it, make them go away. But the idea is to succumb, is to not feel them. I'll tell you guys a story. I know I've said it before, and many of you heard me say this story about Abbot Tryphon. He's a monk in Vashon Island in Seattle. Anyone ever seen this guy? He looks like Santa Claus. He's this huge monk, big white beard. It's an Eastern Orthodox monastery, and he's the abbot of this small monastery. And he was at a Starbucks, and he was just, going into the Starbucks, and he sat down to drink his coffee. And he's sitting at the table right here, and there's a table right next to him, and there's two young people, maybe in their 20s, sitting right next to him. And one of them said, he said to his friend, only a stupid old man would believe in God. Loudly. And he's, 7 inches from Abbot Tryphon. So Abbot Tryphon, tells the story. He says, I didn't react at all. I just continued drinking my coffee. And then when I was done, I got up, went to the lady, the cashier, and I bought 2 gift cards. And I said, can you do me a favor? Can you give these 2 gift cards to those 2 gentlemen over there? But I want you to wait 5 minutes after I leave, please. She said, okay. So she did. And he said maybe 2 or 3 months later, he's at the Starbucks, and he sees the same 2 guys. So they come walking right up to him. And they say, we want to know why you bought us those gift cards. And he said, my God is a God of love, and that's the only language we speak. We don't speak any kind of retribution or hatred. And the one guy who had said the very strong thing immediately started crying and said, I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. And Abbot Tryphon said, I forgave you as soon as you said it. And then that guy proceeded to spend 3 hours talking to Abbot Tryphon about his problems and all the things he had going on and why his life sucks and why it's so hard and blah, 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 right? But the point of the story, Abbot Tryphon's reaction when some guy said, only a stupid old man would believe in God. What was his reaction? He didn't have one. I would have. I would have got hot. I would have looked at him and said, you got something to say? 20-year-old punk, you know how much I can bench? So I would have had words. I would have had a comment. I would have had some veins pop out of my head. He didn't react. Why? Because that part of him is dead. He killed it. That part, that anger, that pride, that ego, that reaction. And because he killed it, he was able to minister to these people As hard as they were to minister to and as difficult as they are, he was able to minister to them because he didn't have that reaction. That part of him was dead. And so in the Pauline on Sunday, this is exactly what St. Paul says. He says, it is a dreadful thing to fall into the hands of the living God. It is a dreadful thing to fall into the hands of the living God. What does that mean? He continues, remember those earlier days after you'd received the light when you endured in a great conflict full of suffering? Sometimes you were publicly exposed to insult and persecution, and at other times you stood side by side with those who were so treated. So St. Paul is telling them, when we fall into the hands of the living God, the things happen. The breaking happens. Kind of like those 5 loaves and 2 fish, right? When they went into the hands of the living God, what did Christ do to those 5 loaves? He broke them. And that's the only way you can distribute loaves. So when we fall into the hands of the living God, what does God do to us? He breaks us. And the smaller he breaks us, the more we can be distributed. If we're whole, we can't be distributed. We're no good. We can't serve. We can't love. But when we fall into his hands, he breaks and he distributes. And the more he breaks, the smaller we are, the more people we can affect. The tinier the pieces. There's a woman who I want you guys to Google. Her name is Sister Clare. C-Lare. She's a Catholic nun. She died a few years ago. Her story's amazing. I highly recommend it. She writes, obedience is the veil under which you must disappear. She was a nun who just served people. She went from Mexico to this, to that, every third world country you can imagine. And she served with a spirit. She's a very recent person. They're all videos, they're all color. She died 4 or 5 years ago. There's tons of video of her. And you should just see her face. Just watch the video and look at her face. And the funny thing about the video is, about her is she was, she's from Ireland, and she's from a really bad part of Ireland. And she was a player, right? She smoked, she drank. In fact, she was at the monastery in Spain with a cigarette in her hand because she's a smoker and a drink in the other. And the priest tells her, she's telling the priest, I think I'm going to be a nun. As she takes a puff of her cigarette and a drink. And he's just looking at her, and I don't know what made him trust her, but he did. But look at the words. Obedience is the veil under which you must disappear. And this is what St. John the Baptist is saying. And this is why she reminds me of St. John the Baptist. Her video was called All or Nothing. That was her quote. And that's the perfect quote. Christian life is all or nothing. There is no middle. There is no middle. There is no, I kind of come, I'm kind of good, I kind of don't do bad things. That's not Christianity. That may be morality, that may be good behavior. Christianity is all or nothing, and that's the way she lived. And that's why she reminds me of St. John the Baptist. He's all or nothing. And that's who Christ sent. That's the one who paved the way. He's the forerunner. He's the one who Christ said, he's going to declare my kingdom. And you're like, this guy? He barely said 80 words. He's the guy? Yeah, because it's not what he said. It's who he was and what he was, right? He had died to himself. And the test came when they said, that guy over there is baptizing, and he says, he's the bridegroom. It's not my people, it's his people. She said, we have to be saints. It's all or nothing. We can't remain in mediocrity. We have to fight with all our strength against the obstacles that impede us from growing. And then she continues, and I'll read this quote and we'll end. Sometimes it's easy to say, yes, I want Christ to enter in me, but this doesn't occur in 5 minutes. You can't just go in front of the tabernacle and say now, and it's done and over with. and he's there just inside you. In my experience, it's a fairly painful process. In order for Christ to live in me, in order for him to dwell inside and take complete possession of my soul, he has to step on and crush the serpent, the old nature, my ego of Clara Crockett. That hurts a lot, sometimes a ton. He has to get rid of everything that isn't him. And there's a lot, by the way. And sometimes my despicable self runs after things that he is trying to rid my soul of. My will, my likes, my attachments, my ideas, my plans, and that hurts. And even though I know it's for my own good, it stings. It doesn't mean that when I say, let me die so you can live, I'm just kidding. No, I'm serious when I say it. But please give me your strength, your grace, your love, your saints, your mother, your heart, so I can lose all fear, so I can open wide the doors to you. And what's the end result of this? This is the joy in the Christian life. And what she said reminds me of St. John the Baptist, and it reminds me of Father Matthew the Poor, and it's going to remind me of every saint who's spoken on this topic, right? This is what we do as Christians. I'll stop there. Does anybody have any questions, comments, thoughts, criticisms, feelings, anecdotes, jokes, appropriate ones? Yes, sir. I didn't see you there. How you doing?
Some of the worries that come, you said like we're not supposed to kind of say like, oh, can you just take this away from me, like I'm done with it. But are we allowed to pray, what Jesus had prayed in the garden, like Lord, if it is your will, take this cup away from me. Like is it still okay to maybe you can take this one away if it's like in your will, but.
And that's a great question, right? So the exact prayer that Christ said in the garden, right? Take this cup away from me, but if it's your will, I'll do it. Right? That's the right prayer because it's real. I mean, if I stand and I say, I'm happy I have cancer. Thank you for my cancer. I'm going to be a great saint now. I'm just kind of lying. Right? I mean, maybe I can say that to people that come to visit me, and I can, be a hero and say, I thank God gave me cancer. I'm so happy. But that's not how I feel, right? So I can say, I'm really not interested in the cancer. Thanks, but no thanks. But if it's your will, I'll do it. Thy will be done, right? So what we pray for isn't so much that my will be done, right? But that God hold my hand while his will is done. So I'm personally not of the opinion if someone gets a disease that we all gather and pray that God take away the disease. But I would pray that God hold his hand during his disease. More importantly, hold his family's hand during the disease. Give them the strength. Give him the strength to learn what he needs to learn to get out of this, whatever God has in his infinite wisdom. I don't know why he got this. I don't know if it's because of his third Uncle Vinny in Connecticut, right? I don't know why he got cancer. I don't know who this is going to change. I don't know how this is going to affect. I have no way of comprehending the ripple effect of these things, right? And you hear about this, and you will, right? Where something happens and you find out that someone was very influenced by something someone said about it. You can't even start to estimate these things, right? So I'm not going to pray that it all go away because I don't like it. That's silly. But I'm going to pray that God be with him, God be with me, God be with his family, and give them the strength. And then not just say it, but do it. Like, there's a lot of I'll pray for you, but there's not a lot of I'll visit you. I'll sit with you. When people are in the hospital, hospitals suck. It's very boring, right? And you're very lonely. You need someone to be there, someone to just sit there, shoot the breeze with. So it isn't just I'll pray for you. I'm going to be there with you. And when you lash out and say, why is God doing this to me? I'm not going to judge you. I'm going to say, I don't know. I know this hurts. That's all I'm going to say. I think. Good. Any other questions? Comments, thoughts? Okay. I did have one question for you.